Okay, Wildcats. Today we're looking at Friday, October 5th, writing linear equations in standard form. That's going to be on page 15. Now, a quick note, there will be no video from Monday, October 8th because there's no school. So if you would, update your table of contents. All right, now your table of contents are updated. Let's take a look at your notes. Well, there's no notes, but actually there are, but I've incorporated them in with the examples, okay? So basically what we're going to do is we're going to write each linear equation in standard form. Well, that's what this is. This is its standard form, okay? And standard form basically is with x and y on the left and a constant on the right, and where a is greater than or equal to 0, basically meaning a has to be a positive number, okay? So let's look at example 1. So the first thing is this 5 is your constant, it needs to be on the right. So we need to subtract 5 from both sides, and I'm going to go and put a 1 in front of the x. So now that becomes 0. You're left with negative 1x equals 3y minus 5. Okay, so we have the constant on the right, but now we need to move the y to the left, so we're going to subtract 3y from both sides. Notice I left space because I knew that I was going to move the y to the left, so I left space here. Okay, so then that's negative 1x minus 3y equals negative 5. Now, a can't be negative, so what we need to do is we need to multiply this by a negative 1, okay? Because a negative times negative would be a positive. But because of the equation, you have to use equality. What you do to one term, you have to do to all the terms. So negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1x. Negative 1 times a negative 3 is a positive 3y. And negative 1 times negative 5 is a positive 5. You now have standard form. And I want you to go ahead and write out what the A, B, and C are. So A is 1, B is 3, and C is 5. All right, let's take a look at example 2. Now, we need to get rid of the fraction, okay, because you notice in standard form there's no fraction. So let's just take a look at 2/3, right? If I multiply 2/3 times 3, well, 2 times 3 is 6. 6 divided by 3 is 2. So if I multiply this by 3, I'll get rid of the fraction. But again, because of the equality, you need to multiply everything by 3. Now, there's a 1 in front of the y, so 3 times 1 is 3y. 3 times 2 is 6, divided by 3x minus 4. Okay? So let's simplify the fraction. So then we got 3y equals 6 divided by 3 is 2x minus 4. Okay? Well, we have c. It's on the right. That's good. But we need x on the left. So we're going to subtract 2x from both sides. So this becomes 0. This becomes negative 2x. That's a positive 3, so it's plus 3y equals negative 4. Now again, remember a has to be greater than 0, so we can't have a negative 2. So we need to multiply everything by negative 1. Negative 1 times negative 2 is a positive 2x. Negative 1 times 3 is negative 3y. And negative 1 times negative 4 is a positive 4. Now, b can actually be negative, but a has to be positive. So we're okay with b being negative 3. So a is 2, b is negative 3, and c is 4. All right, let's take a look at example 3. All right, example 3. When there's not a number in front of the variable, I put a 1. All right, in example 3, we have x and y on the left, but we have this x that has to be moved as well. Okay, so we need to subtract 3x from both sides. Notice that I subtracted it from the x's. Okay, this becomes 0. Now 1 minus 3 is negative 2x. minus 1y equals positive 7. Now we're almost there, but remember a can't be negative, so we have to multiply everything by negative 1. So negative 1 times a negative 2 is positive 2x. Negative 1 times a negative is a positive 1y. And negative 1 times 7 is a negative 7. Okay, so then a equals 2, b equals 1, c equals negative 7. All right, so go ahead and finish up example 1, 2, and 3. Now that's standard. Example 1, 2, and 3 are standard form with 2 variables. Now let's look at standard form in 3 variables. Okay, so again, standard form. The only difference is now you have a, b, c, and d. Okay, where again a has to be greater than or equal to 0. Right, and again, x, y, and z all have to be on the left, and d in this case is the constant, has to be on the right. So in example 4, you already have x and z, but y needs to be moved to the left. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and rewrite this 3x and then plus z equals y minus 2. The reason I did that is because the y, when we move it over, needs to be in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 there. So we have to subtract 1y, and notice I'm subtracting it where the y would be. Okay, so this becomes 0. Now you have 3x minus 1y plus, I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 there, 1z equals negative 2. So now a is positive, you have x, y, and z on the left, and the constant on the right. So we just define our variables. So a is 3, b is negative 1, c is 1, and d is negative 2. All right. Now let's look at example 5. All right. So here we have x, y, and z on the left, but we need to move the 10 to the right. So we're going to subtract 10 from both sides. Now we have negative 1x plus 2y minus 1z. 1 minus 10 is a negative 9. Now we have the variables on the left and the constant on the right, but a can't be negative, so we need to multiply everything by negative 1. So negative 1 times 1 is 1x. Negative 1 times 2 is a minus 2y. And b can be negative, we're not worried about that. Negative 1 times negative 1 is a positive 1. And then negative 1 times negative 9 is a positive 9. We now have it in standard form. And I was thinking about it, you could write a, b, c, and d horizontally, but you could also maybe write it this way. And I think that's probably how I should have done it in example 4. I think you have more room if you do it that way. So a is 1, b is negative 2, c is 1, and d is 9. All right, example 6. All right, so again, you can't have a fraction. And let's look at it. If we multiply 1/2 times 2, we get 2 times 1 is 2 divided by 2, which is 1. So we know we need to multiply this by 2, but because of equality, we need to multiply everything by 2. So 2 times 1/2 is 2 divided by 2y. 2 times 1 is plus 2z equals 2 times 2 is 4x plus 2 times 4 is 8. So now we can simplify that. 2 divided by 2 is 1, so that's 1y plus 2z equals 4x plus 8. Now, we just need to move the x to the left, so we're going to subtract 4x from both sides. So now we get negative 4x plus 1y plus 2z equals 8. Again, a can't be negative, so we're going to multiply everything by negative 1. So negative 1 times negative 4 is a positive 4x. Negative 1 times 1 is a negative 1y. Negative 1 times 2 is a negative 2z. And negative 1 times 8 is a negative 8. We now have it in standard form. Now we just define our variables. So a equals B equals, C equals, and D equals. All right, so A is 4, B is -1, C is -2, and D is -8. All right, now I'm looking at the time. This is only a 10-minute video. If you pause and probably only take you about maybe 15, 17, 18, maybe 18 minutes at the most to finish this. In a 15-minute class period, that should give you about 20 minutes or so to finish your assignment. So I'm thinking probably on Friday, I'm thinking after about 30 minutes of class, you should have your assignment completed. Now I'm going to check for completion, and then we'll use the last 15 minutes to go over, I'll check for completion of the assignment and go over the problems, okay? So with that, have a wonderful Wildcat day.